Today's video, do you need an expensive audio interface for home recording? People recently have been asking me what I used to record. And it got me thinking, what do you need to record at home to do things like this? YouTube or maybe some band demos, that kind of thing. I'm not talking big professional studio, but I'm talking on a smaller amateur or someone who's a real hobbyist level. From my own experience, and it's pretty obvious to be honest, the more you spend, the better you're going to get and the better sound quality. Mostly it rings true, but the big thing with this, and this is what this video is about, do you need it? And will you notice the difference? Will you notice the difference? Okay, there's going to be people out there who go, yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it. But the majority of people will not hear a difference between a unit that costs £300 or dollars and one that costs £2,000 or dollars. Can you afford it? This might sound silly, but I've seen so many people rush out with a credit card, buy this audio interface that costs lots of money, and then they don't use it till they get bored and move on to something else. Is it worthwhile doing that when you probably get something cheaper that does the job just as well for what you need? For example, I don't make any money doing this. Maybe if you click my links below, I might be able to make a little bit and put it back into the channel. I use a Focusrite Scarlett 214 or 2i4. I'll put it on the screen now. So do I ever think about upgrading it? It's 2 input channels. It's got the outputs I need. Should I upgrade it? And do I want to? Well, the answer is yes, I do want to. Of course I do. I get gas like everybody else. But do I need it though? At my level now, do I need to improve this? Do I need to make the sound better? There's probably lots of people typing their keyboard now, yes, you suck, you suck. But as much as I do try and justify it in my head, I don't think I do need anything better just yet. My videos sound fairly decent, at least I think so. And I can get some good recordings. I'm using a mic now and I'm recording into the interface. So it works, it does what it needs to do. I do have a goal to improve it. I'd like to have more inputs so I can record more mics, like room mics and other things. I would like to have better preamps and I would like to do better recordings. But more importantly, I'd like some better mics. I think that's the number one you need here. But with the Focusrite, it's not the newest model, it's the version 2. And as much as I try and justify it, I just don't need it at the moment. My goal is to work towards something better when I have more of a reason to upgrade. This is not the first audio interface I've had, nor is it the first recording device. Here is a quick history. I started on 4-track tape recorders back in the 90s. Like this one by Tascam, and that was used mostly for recording bands I was in, for making demos and recording live shows, so we got an idea of how we sounded. I then went on to digital recorders like this one by Fostech. It's a 16-track recorder, so it gave me plenty of options. It had 8 inputs, but you could also plug in some more inputs, and I used that with an output desk, mixed it all together, and that's how I made my recordings. And in some ways I found it better than a DAW because you couldn't see what was on the screen so much. It was a very small screen. You had to really use your ears. With DAWs you can really get into the habit of just looking at the screen and seeing what the screen tells you rather than using your ears too much. Sometimes it is good to switch off the screen and just listen. And then I went on to USB interfaces. I think I started off with the Line 6 one. I think that was the first one I had, which was purely just USB. That was quite cool, I like that one. I think I've still got it in the loft somewhere. Then after using USB interfaces, I went into a bigger Firewire interface and I ended up recording local bands with it. It was a great device, I absolutely loved it. And it had motorised faders, which I love so much. And then I moved abroad for a few more years. I bought a smaller device for recording guitar straight into... I actually recorded some YouTube videos, but mostly using an iPhone, to be honest. It was an iPhone 4 at the time. I'll try and dig some out and show some on the screen now. So I ended up with the Focusrite just before I started doing these videos, just because it was a good price. It had everything I needed, 2 inputs. The mic preamps are pretty good by Focusrite, and that's fine. Just everything I need for home recording and getting back into it again. What should you look for in an audio interface, or what should generally people look for in an audio interface? First of all, will it work on your computer? I know that sounds a bit crazy, but there's different types of inputs. Will it work on some of the newer Macs? Will it work on some older PCs? You've got to check all these things out first. That's one of the first things I recommend. Will it work on your system? Do you have an old Mac? Do you have a new Mac? Do you have an old PC? Do you have a new PC? Many PCs probably won't have USB-C inputs, or if they do, will they have Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 inputs? All these kind of things you've got to look for when you're buying your interface. Will it work on your system? Will it work on your system? Also, make sure it's got good drivers. Check some reviews, see what people say about those. That's the only thing with computer hardware. You really have to check. Make sure everything works together. To be honest, I use a Mac now. I use a Mac Mini, but I used PCs for 20 odd years. Just my preference. I'm not saying one's better than the other because I love both. How many inputs and outputs do I need? Is it one just to record a guitar? Or a microphone like this? Or perhaps you need two inputs to record two microphones or two things directly into it, like a guitar and a synthesizer. Do you need four inputs because you would like to record some vocals and some outboard gear such as synths? Or play a small drum kit with just stereo mics and one in front of the kit. Maybe you want to record a band and then you need 8 inputs with the option to expand more I/O in the future. What do you need? What's your setup? That's really important. So you get the right number of in and outs. To be honest, I would always have too many rather than too less, but always that depends on your budget. The more ins and outs you get, the more it's going to cost, and I wouldn't cheap out on this stuff either. So you want a kind of nice range where it's good quality, good price, and you've got the ins and outs you need. So the next thing to look at is your budget. How much have you got to spend? And realistically, how much do you want to spend? Don't get yourself in debt over this, especially if you're a beginner, because you've got to learn this stuff and it takes time. It's best to start off with something that's pretty good that you can use for many years, but then have the option to upgrade later if you like it, rather than spend something expensive and then after 3 months you go, this ain't for me. But I wouldn't go too cheap either. Probably just aim a little bit higher. Often brands you know or heard of, there's a reason why people talk about them most, because they're normally pretty good. Not always read a review first. So the next thing to look at is preamps. The preamps boost the signal, especially if you're recording with a microphone. You're going to need decent preamps because it stops the background noise. It also stops some distortions coming in through the microphone. Point up there, the mic's there. So the preamps, you're going to need good preamps. That's the thing that boosts the signal into your device. Mics normally record at quite a low signal, so you need that push to bring it up so you can get a good sound quality going in. Not too loud so it distorts, but that good sound. Bad preamps will bring noise in as well, so as you bring it up, the noise comes up and you'll hear a shh, or sometimes even worse, but basically you'll get that hissy sound. Good preamps will bring the noise floor down, bring the sound up, but you pay for that. So you've got to kind of find that nice in-between for a good price. They can also affect your signal by, say, rolling off the bass, rolling off too much treble, or pushing too much mid-range or taking away too much mid-range. All these things are factors when you look at preamps. Things you probably never think of. It does get a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basic thing to look at. Does it affect the sound? Does it bring in noise? Does it affect the signal somehow by rolling off the bass or the treble? It's not too bad, it does its job well. I haven't had any complaints. Probably any errors I've got, it's user error. Another thing to look at, does it have 48 volt phantom power? That's for powering some condenser microphones. Another big one is the ADDA converters. So analog digital is the inputs coming in. So you've got your analog preamps and then you've got a chip that converts it into digital. And the DA are the digital to analog. So when you're going from the box, your recording device and your computer, to your speakers, it will convert it from the digital to the analog, which then goes into your speakers or any outboard gear you might have. Higher quality ADDA chips They stop a lot of noise that can be caused in the conversion between analog and digital, and that stops distortion and other artifacts and noise getting into your signal. With analog digital and digital analog converters, you also have the latency to take into effect. So obviously the more you spend, the less the latency, and you get less of that echo. So if you play guitar into a audio device, or you've sung into it, and then by the time it's come back to the speakers, you've heard a slight echo. So more expensive is best, right? Well, yes and no. And let's be honest, the majority of people will not hear much or if any difference between consumer grade gear and professional grade gear. It's there, it's definitely there, but to be honest, the room needs to be treated better and your mics need to be better before you worry about your audio interface. So as a beginner, I'd recommend get something decent but not too expensive. And then as you get better, work your way up and you'll hear different things you've never noticed before. It all comes with experience. So if you're just starting out, I would look at something between $100 to $300 mark and not break the bank, and get something good you can use for many years. A lot of cases you can get something really good for that price. So a couple brands I would look at are these. So with Focusrite, you've got the Scarlett range. I've got the 2i4. Now if you're going to buy a Focusrite audio interface, I would look at the 3 series. Don't go back to the 2 or 1 series. I think they fixed any issue they had with those series. I would look at Presonus. They're really good. In fact, I have one here. I would also look at Motu, Ardian and SSL. They all do really good interfaces for this price range. If you use Cubase, Steinberg do some really good audio interfaces that can be used with other DAWs as well. Now if you have a higher budget, then I would look at something like this. I would go for something like the Universal Audio Apollo range. It powers plugins, and Universal Audio do amazing plugins. They have for a very long time. So this is a really good option to look at. Then I would look at the Focusrite Claret range. These are pro audio preamps used in many studios and they're great. So that's another option to look at. You have the Scarlett range, which is lower end, and then it goes up to the Claret range, which are more high-end pro audio. And if you want to spend more money than these devices, then you probably know better than me what you want anyway. Well, I hope this helps with a brief look at audio interfaces and why you don't necessarily need the most expensive things out there. Just be happy with what you can afford, what you can get, and learn it. Learn your DAW, learn about microphones. I hope this helps with a brief look at audio interfaces and that you don't need to spend a lot of money to get something pretty good that's going to do the job for you. Got any questions? Leave them in the comment section below. I look forward to seeing you again in my next video. Bye bye.